Hey, what's up, Tom? Quick demo video for you for your KR Sidious. So just got this done. Spent some time going over this guy because there's a lot going on here. This is one of those sabers that there's just almost no room for anything to happen in this guy. So you know, it takes some doing, and you have to put it together a certain way, and you have to take it out. You have to take the chassis out a certain way. So let's just go over everything, right? This is installed with a Proffie V2. It's a 2-button setup. So your red button over here, that's going to be your activation switch. And then your green button over here, that's your auxiliary. You do have CCSabers LED pixels in here. This does have motion control also. So you have that if you don't want to use the buttons, and we'll go over all of that. To get to the chassis, what we want to do is we want to take an Allen key. We want to come over here and take this greebly off right here. So we're going to do that real quick. It's in there tight, but it holds everything in place. So, you know, it fits. It comes out, it goes in, it does everything it's supposed to, but this saber is locked down. When you put everything in here, it is locked down. So when I'm taking that greebly out, I kind of hold this back piece with my pinky. That way it doesn't fall out, because once you take that out, this guy right here pops right off, right? So you've got this guy. This little square piece that you see sticking out, that's going to come into play. That helps you clock the chassis. Now, before I take the chassis out, you've got these 2 acrylic pieces. You've got a red acrylic piece and a green one for your buttons. I like to have those facing down because they're just kind of free floating in there. The only thing holding them in is the chassis. So once I slide that chassis in and I flip this guy over, those acrylic pieces are actually resting on top of the switches. So I flip it over upside down like this, so gravity holds them in place and they don't fall out when you take the chassis out. You will inevitably have these fall out on you. It happens. They are a pain in the neck to put in, and it will probably happen while I'm doing this demo, but this helps if you can remember this. Now you're going to have to take your finger and push the chassis out this way. If you'll look in there, you'll notice there's a little bit, you can see that silver ring on the bottom, right? Because this PCB is offset so that it is centered up with your emitter. It's not, this emitter is not centered up with the rest of the hilt handle. It's weird. It's the only one of these I've ever done, the only saber I've ever done like that, where I had to take the PCB and actually off-center it a little bit so that it would match your blade. But because of that, when you look in here, you can see at the top piece, there's more chassis material. So I like to push on that. Try not to push on the pins. So when it doesn't have a battery in, it slides right out, right? So it'll pop out the back, and then at this point you can just kind of take your fingers and you can pull it right out. And then you can try to take this hilt and set it down to where those switches are still facing down and save yourself a headache. So far so good, they haven't fallen out on me. Now, because this chassis is so tight and so small, I cannot hide my wires like I usually like to do. I'd have all these wires underneath your board. I was able to get away with all that except for your LED wires for each of your switches. I had to run them on top of the board, and then I had to run your resistors for those switches back here. So I ran them all the way to the back in front of the board, and then I came back and I actually brought them to the positive speaker pad over here. And that's how I power your LEDs for your switches. But I did it as neat as I could. I ran those, I do have these not glued down. These resistors aren't glued down, so that way you can get to your board. If you need to get to your SD card or your micro USB and you find that these are getting in your way, you can just move them up and out of your way. And then you can take your SD card out from here without moving the board. I did adhese the board down to the chassis so that it wouldn't move on you. So everything is accessible. I make sure it's like that, and I install the board on purpose first before I program it. That way I practice what I preach. So I was able to do everything once this guy was installed. No problem, right? So you do have a removable battery system. So right here, your spring side, that's going to be the negative side of your battery. You are going to have to source your own battery. Since I'm sending this overseas, I can't send a battery with it. I use It's an 18650 3000 milliamp lithium ion battery. So 3000 milliamp or higher, you'll be fine. as long as it's 18650, right? Anything bigger than that battery is not going to fit in the battery compartment. This battery barely fits. So you've got a Smuggler's Outpost emblem right here because I'm part of Smugglers. I like to put that on here sometimes. This is a Smuggler's Outpost 24mm speaker. It does say Emperor Palpatine over here in Arabic on this side, and then I do have Solo Sabers over here in Arabic on the other side. So that's your chassis, all in one, right? Your PCBs, your switches, speaker, battery, and board. So we're going to throw a battery in this guy. When putting a battery in, you're going to find that whatever battery you've got probably has a sticker on it, and it delineates what kind of battery it is. So I like to put that sticker on the inside of the chassis. Every little bit of room helps. So we got that animation, everything's good to go. Now we're going to come over here and I'm going to take this board and I'm actually going to flip it upside down so the battery is actually facing up. And the reason I do that is so that it matches the hilt where I'm holding the switches down. So now you can see my switches on my chassis are facing down to match the acrylic pieces I've got facing down in the Saber. If you line this guy up the best that you can before you start going in, it helps out a lot. So when you get to here, you're going to hit that first side of that battery. You're going to need to push that down a little bit to get past that handle. So I push it down a little bit. I got past the handle. Now I'm going to push it in as straight as I can. It is a little snug, but it goes. I spent quite a bit of time on this chassis design, and then after I print it, I spend quite a bit of time, especially on this guy, finishing it up. I like to do a little polishing on my chassis anyway, but this guy I do a little bit extra, just so that I take away as many problems as I can. Now I'm going to show you something when I get it in. When you get it in, you're going to see a little divot in your chassis. Let me push it in all the way first so those acrylic pieces don't fall out on me. Sometimes it can be weird to try to explain and show the stuff as I'm doing it. If you find that your chassis is not completely lined up the first time, like I did here, because I'm too busy trying to talk about it and not really paying attention, just push it out and then go back in with it. It does have to be lined up perfectly, but I'll show you how I line that up. That looks good. When this chassis is fully engaged, the switches won't fall out, and then I could move this Saber around any way I want to. And then let me pop this back off. So you remember when we took this gold piece off, I told you this square piece right here was going to come into play. This piece that's sticking out right here, right? That comes into play with right here in your chassis. You can see that I have that little cutout right there, that little square cutout. And that is meant to accept this little square piece right here. And that's how you know your chassis is clocked in correctly, because if you don't have this guy exactly lined up and you go to push this guy in, it's not going to line up. It won't go all the way. So when I come over here and I push it in, I'm left-handed. Let me swap this around. I need my left hand. Now, if I go in and I try to push that, if I didn't have that chassis lined up correctly, this would not be sitting flush where it needed to be. So that's an indicator that your switches aren't lined up. So you would want to go in and try to do that again. It is pretty easy once you do it a few times. You get the hang of it. I get it pretty much on the first try, but you know, I do realize I do this a lot too, but it's easy to do. Now, once we get that in, we're going to hold that pommel in and we're going to come back and we're going to screw our greebly back in. That greebly goes through your handle and into that pommel piece that gold pommel piece that we just put on. And it lines everything up. And again, if you don't have it lined up perfectly, this won't screw in. But if you have this flush with the Saber, this guy is going to go in. I mean, that's the only way it does it. So now we've got twist off. Now we've got our fully functional Saber. And as you just saw, we've got motion control. And you got your LEDs working like they should. LEDs in here working like they should. Nice smooth swing, and then we could twist off. Now if we didn't want to do that, we just hit that red acrylic piece, that's our activation. And so our auxiliaries over here. Twist off. And we're gonna throw a blade in it. I've got a full length blade here. I'm gonna throw it in. Not gonna get too wild with it. I'm not gonna use the blade retention for this video, but your blade retention is located right here, right on the very tip of your emitter. Very small Allen key, right? So, activation. I'll do that again so you can see it in the camera. Now I accidentally went to a stock font, so let's get back to a cool one. We do that by tapping the auxiliary when the blade is off. You just tap through them, cycle through them all. So now we've got this guy. And then we can tap our auxiliary for blaster deflex. Hold it down for blade lockup. You have a responsive blade, so it will get brighter as you swing it. I'm not swinging around too much since I don't have the blade retention engaged. And we'll go to the next one. This is Exegol. This is the one I gave you an unstable one on, obviously. I just thought it looked cool. So now you have a little bit of variety, but still Sith blades. Blaster deflex, blade lockup, twist off. Now if you want to get to your music, you just hold the power button for a second and then let go. Now you got your music track playing. And you can turn the blade on when you got the music playing, right? Everything you want to do. And then to turn it back off, you do the same thing. Just hold the power button for a second and then let go. And that's how you get to your music. So I'm going to take this blade out. Getting the chassis out is just as important as how we put it in, right? We do the same thing. We're going to want to take this guy off, obviously. Not to insult your intelligence. I'm just trying to, if I go over everything that I can think of, then there's no question. So we'll take this greebly off. That comes off. Remember, I'm holding that with my pinky so I don't drop it. That guy pops off. Now with the battery in it, it's a little more stiff, right? Because it's just I'm taking up every bit of that space that I possibly can to get this install done. So we still want to come in here and we still want to push on it from not on the pins, but on the top of the PCB. Just got my thumb in there. If it goes off, that's fine, just twist it. So I got it out a little bit. I'm gonna try to push it a little bit more with my finger. Came out that way. I'm gonna keep my acrylic pieces facing down. I'm gonna pull the chassis right out. And then I'll put the saber down. So from here, I can just come in here right here on the positive side and pop that guy right out with my finger, just like that. And then when I'm done, empty chassis, I'm gonna put it right back in the saber. Make sure she's lined up. I'll test my alignment with this guy. Everything's good to go. So that's locked in. I'll hold that in place, and then while I'm doing this, while I'm here, I'll just screw in this greebly real quick to keep this pommel piece on. few more turns. I did get your battery charger in the mail from TCSS, so that will be going out with your Saber as well. And then here we go. Here's our Saber. We've got this chassis back in. You can hear the tactile feels on your switches, so you know everything is good there. And on top of that, like I said before, if you don't have this chassis lined up to the switches properly, this won't ever go on right. So you'll know right away if something's off. So that's your Saber. Hope it came out the way you like. Let me know if you got any questions. I will get this out in the mail to you today, actually. Thanks.